Before you click out of this video, I get it, but hang in there. When I first learned about restorative practices, I was thinking that it was just the latest fad in public education, but I gave it a chance. And I've been able to adapt it to an orchestra classroom pretty well. And as orchestra teachers, if we see a bow hold, we fix it. We show the student how to hold the bow right. If we hear an F sharp instead of an F natural, we teach the student about finger patterns. I've made over 200 videos on technical instruction on this channel, but how often do we think about students and their social needs? If a student has an underdeveloped social skill, how do we teach them? A lot of you might already be using restorative practices in some form in your classroom, and it might just be valuable to formalize your knowledge or gather some ideas, and I bet you'll come up with some ideas of your own that will fit your classroom the best. And as we know, values are at the base of the pyramid, and everything that we do comes back to values. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the basics of restorative practices just to give some background so that you can get an idea about what it is, where it came from. And then in the subsequent videos, I'm going to show you how to manipulate it, and I'm going to shoot a demonstration video on what I think it could look like in a rehearsal setting. So first, what are restorative practices? From my research, the restorative practices concept is derived from the restorative justice movement, which attempts to rehabilitate people who've been convicted of a criminal offense. The idea is that people in the criminal justice system ask the person questions like, who was hurt by their actions? What is their needs? Who's going to help them? What caused this offense? Who else was affected by this? What are some steps to set things right? In the current model, at least where I come from, very different questions are asked. The criminal justice system here asks what law has been broken, who violated the law, and what does the statute recommend for punishment. And then we can go even further and ask what are the aggravators, how do we determine appropriate punishment, and does that seem familiar? A lot of schools operate in the same way when it comes to student behavior. When kids are fighting, they get sent to the principal's office. The principal looks up how many days of suspension to give them, and then, oh, you're a repeat offender? Okay, well, we'll double that. There were some law professors and people way smarter than me that noticed something that they call the school to prison pipeline. And a statistic that I've seen from 2011 to 2020 is that 71% of people currently incarcerated had some sort of juvenile arrest. Well, what happened before the arrest? How many detentions? How many times were they put on an alternative behavioral center? How many expulsions? Could we have done anything to intervene and adjust their trajectory into adulthood? And that's ultimately the problem that the restorative practices attempts to solve. There are restorative schools, restorative principals and teachers with certifications. There are entire school districts that handle student behavior this way. And in some jurisdictions, it's the law that your school has to do some kind of restorative practice within the school system. Okay, so what does this look like? Not in the orchestra room, but in the general population. So I'll just give you an example. Like, let's say students notice some graffiti in the restroom. The students report the graffiti to their teacher, and the teacher sits down with them in something called a circle. Usually they have some sort of object, and only the person with the object is allowed to speak. And the students share about how it affects them, who else it affects, how do we repair it, and how do we move on. The students might decide to clean up the graffiti themselves. They might discover who made the graffiti, and then if that's the case, they sit down with that student, usually one-on-one at first, and ask similar questions. They give the student a chance to think about things, like when you ask them, who does this affect, they might not have an answer right away. Was it vulgar? Were people offended? Did it spread rumors? Did it damage somebody's reputation? Then, once we understand the scope of the damage, we look into how to fix it. Well, who should clean up the restroom? And how do we restore someone's reputation? Oh, that's tricky, maybe spread positive things about the person instead. All right, well, you get the point. We understand how this works on a school level to implement restorative practices, but how does this work inside of your classroom? That will be the topic of my next video, and I hope to see you then.